along this morning as we remember Jesus, you can turn to Mark chapter 1. Mark chapter 1 is where we are going to start. This is the time of our service where we focus on Jesus and remembering his life and what he has done for us and how important he is to us. And as we start out, I just want to make this clear observation, and that is this: Jesus is amazing. And not only is he amazing today, he was amazing when he walked this earth. And what he was able to do and accomplish while he walked this earth is phenomenal to me, and I am impressed with how much he got done in such a short period of time. How many of you this morning consider yourself to be a morning person? Raise your hand if you're a morning person. All right, we have several people who are morning people. Raise your hand if you are a night owl. All right, multiple people here are night owls. I am here to tell you Jesus was the earliest bird ever, and he was the latest owl ever. Jesus would get up before all the early birds got up. And Jesus would stay up when all the night owls have already gone to bed. And I want to just impress upon us this morning how Jesus' body broke down or was worn out before he ever got to the cross. And so as we look at what he did while he lived, I think we'll be overly impressed with how much Jesus did for us in his ministry on a regular basis. So I want to point out, first of all, how early mornings were for Jesus. In Mark chapter 1 and verse 35, Mark chapter 1 and verse 35, the text says this: "Now in the morning, having risen a long while before daylight, he went out and departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him. And when they found him, they said to him, 'Everyone is looking for you.'" So this is the point, that before everyone else got up, even those early risers and started looking for Jesus, he was already up. He was already up spending time alone in a solitary place with his Father. Well, let's look at the late nights. And since we're in Mark, let's read Mark's account first. So Mark chapter 6 and verse 30. Mark chapter 6 and verse 30. This is going to describe Jesus after he fed the 5,000. And remember that this day started out when they were already tired and they wanted some time in a solitary place. So in Mark chapter 6 and verse 30, it says, "Then the apostles gathered to Jesus and told him all things." They just came back from their limited commission, both what they had done and what they had taught. And he said to them, "Come aside by yourself to a deserted place and rest a while." And the Bible describes this as people coming in and out, in and out, in and out all the time, and Jesus is talking to them, and how he and his disciples didn't have time to eat. So they get in the boat and they go on the Sea of Galilee. They're trying to find this secluded place so they can finally have the rest that they all needed. Well, we know how the story goes. The people meet him there. They get there ahead of time. They are walking. They get there ahead of time. And as they go to the shore, there's just thousands and thousands of people that are waiting for Jesus on the shore. So in verse 30 of Mark chapter 6, "So they departed to a deserted place in the boat by themselves." But let's look at verse 35. It says, "When the day was now far spent," so it's already getting evening time, "his disciples came to him and said, 'This is a deserted place, and already the hour is late.'" So it's getting late in the evening before Jesus feeds the multitudes. And then in verse 36, the disciples say, "Send them away that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat." Now I want to mark this here. The multitudes had nothing to eat. 5,000 men plus women and children. Who else didn't have anything to eat? The disciples didn't have anything. Jesus hadn't had anything. So all day he was feeding these multitudes with very little food in his own body to sustain his body, to give to the multitudes what they needed. There are additional things that I think are important on this point. found in Matthew's account. So Matthew's account is Matthew chapter 14, and we're going to focus on verses 22 through 25. Matthew 14, verses 22 through 25. This is after the evening had come, after the day was far spent, after he had fed the multitudes. It says in verse 22, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on a mountain by himself to pray. Now when evening had come, he was alone there. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by waves, for the wind was contrary. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. Do you know what the 4th hour watch of the night is? It's 3 to 6 a.m. So sometime after all this busy day that Jesus had, between 3 and 6 a.m., he goes walking on the sea and sees them rowing against the storm. When I was at FC, I was a night watchman one year. That was when they let students be night watchmen. Our shifts were, one week we would have the 9 o'clock in the evening to the midnight shift. The next week we would have the midnight to the 3 o'clock in the morning shift. And the next week we would have the 3 o'clock in the morning shift to the 6 o'clock in the morning shift. And then the next week we would be off. I can't imagine how hard this was for Jesus physically in his body. The body that eventually ends up being broken. Now, I realize no bones were broken of Jesus. Paul does indicate that his body was broken for us, although that word may not be in the original text. But boy, I can't help but think it was broken down for us. It was worn out for us by the time he ever got to the cross. Now, this day in Jesus' life wasn't out of the ordinary. You know, if this is something that he did one time in his life, or 2 times in his life, but it seems to be the norm for him to get up before everybody else, to stay up later than everybody else, and to spend the entire day focused on the needs of other people. So we're in Mark chapter 6. We already noted that Jesus wanted a deserted place. Go to Mark chapter 3, and we'll see how persistent these crowds were, how big they were, and the obstacles people overcame just to spend some time with Jesus. Mark chapter 3 and verse 7, it says, but when Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and a great multitude from Galilee followed him, and from Judea and Jerusalem and Idumea and beyond the Jordan, and those from Tyre and Sidon, a great multitude, when they heard how many things he was doing, came to him. So look at the regions there. All over, all the way from Galilee, Tyre and Sidon, all the way down to Judea and Jerusalem. His fame spread. Why did his fame spread? Because he wasn't doing very much? Nobody heard of him? Why was his fame spreading? Because he was doing a whole lot every single day. And the word would spread. Jesus healed me. Jesus healed me. Jesus took time to teach me this. And that was being spread. So people were coming from everywhere just to spend time with him. Luke chapter 8 and verse 42 says this, but as he went, multitudes thronged him. And a woman having a flow of blood for 12 years, who had spent all of her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any of them, came and touched him. And when she touched him, Jesus said, who touched me? Everybody denied, I didn't touch him. Did you touch him? Nobody touched him. Peter looked to Jesus and said, Master, the multitudes throng and press you, and you say, who touched me? They're all touching you. They're all thronging about next to you. I mean, can you imagine just having to walk like this? I mean, all the time, because there were constantly people around you pressing about. And this isn't anything new. We've looked at this before. But what hit me this week as I was looking at it is just the toll that had to take on his body. We protect our time. We protect our space. And oftentimes it is under the auspice of staying physically healthy and physically strong. I need my space. I need my rest. I need this. Well, Jesus sacrificed that for you and for me. You remember what happened in Luke chapter 5 when they're in a house. There's no room for anybody else in the house. What did the people have to do? Carrying the man who was paralyzed. They had to go up and cut a hole in the roof just to get to their friend to Jesus. And Luke chapter 19 tells us the story of Zacchaeus. He wanted to see Jesus. What did he have to do to see Jesus? He had to climb up in a tree just to see Jesus passing by. And it just tells us that this enormous amount of energy Jesus had to spend every single day just to meet the demands of other people. It's impressive. It's not only that. Jesus lived in a time period where he didn't ride an animal. He didn't ride a bicycle even. What did Jesus do daily? He walked. And they estimate that Jesus probably spent, on average, walking 20 miles a day. Now, those of you who are physically fit, you probably don't walk 20 miles a day. And there are times where Jesus would have had to walk 40 miles and even 75 miles over the course of a few days to go from Galilee down to Jerusalem, which he did on a regular basis. And the terrain wasn't just flat like it is in Florida. The terrain was mountainous and the roads weren't paved. He was walking on very difficult paths to get to where he wanted to go. And Jesus, we talk about being able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Jesus could walk and teach the most amazing things at the same time. As he walked, he talked. As he talked, he was teaching. And it was a constant thing for him to do that. And then you have the fasting and just going without meals. Now, I know that there's a lot of talk now about fasting being healthy for the body to some degree. Sometimes Jesus did this on purpose. Sometimes he just missed meals because he didn't have the time to eat or the food to eat. We've looked at one of those already when he was feeding the 5,000. But remember when he met with the woman at the well? He needed food. He needed water. Pushing his body to its physical limitations for us on a daily basis. And you can't read all of these accounts and still be surprised why he was able to sleep in a boat on a pillow during a storm. The only way you can do that is if you have pushed your body to the limits and you're physically and emotionally and mentally exhausted. Jesus got every single ounce of what his body could give him every single day, and it was never for him, it was always for others, and it was for us. That really impresses me about Jesus. As we continue to remember Jesus, for those of you who would like, you could turn to Mark chapter 1. Mark chapter 1, verses 31 through 39 detail out one single day in the ministry of Jesus that starts with him teaching in the synagogue, casting out a demon, going back to Peter's house and healing his mother-in-law, and then everybody coming to him at evening when the sun went down to be healed. And then what does he do? Does he sleep in the next day? No. He gets up early. So read Mark chapter 1, 21 through 39 if you'd like, just thinking about this one day and what Jesus did for us on this one day and what effect that would have on the body that we are going to remember of our Lord.